Joining me now is Dr. Sreedhar Potarazu. Doctor, great to see you. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, doctor, in the medical community about maybe extending the retirement age. So typically people retire at age 65, but hey, we're living longer. And you, doctor, think it makes sense to do so.
I do. Jeff, historically, we were retired, people were retiring, and when the age was 65, our longevity was very different. Even in my own practice, I see a lot of people that are living well into their 90s, a few even beyond 100. So I feel like there should be a reset, and maybe not for everybody, but since our lifespans have changed significantly, that we might rethink for various reasons, sort of delaying the retirement age, maybe even beyond, some are suggesting maybe it needs to be 67, but maybe even into our 70s. Of course, it depends on the individual, it depends on their health, their financial status, whether they enjoy their work. So it's not as if everybody needs to be forced, but I do think that there are certain individual benefits in terms of our own productivity, well being, and human connection. There are certain benefits, of course, economically, in terms of having a sustained income. There are perhaps benefits in terms of health benefits, right? In terms of maintaining coverage that are becoming more difficult. And certainly from a politics standpoint, the overall solvency of Medicare itself and Social Security has always been an issue that is hovering in terms of whether the trust fund will be solvent before you and I start to me before you in terms of tapping in. But nonetheless, I think that these are some of the issues that that need to be looked at more closely, and maybe that traditional age from where the program came out, now almost 60 years ago, are those parameters still relevant?
And I tend to agree. I mean, I can only speak for myself in terms of my situation and my circumstances. I enjoy working, but you don't have, doctor, you don't have to do the same job for longer. I think people maybe may, and I can't get in everyone's shoes and head, but may misunderstand that, okay, well, now you, instead of working 40 years in a career, you're working 45. But say you enjoy fixing motorcycles, or you want to be be a lawyer, or some other vocation. This affords you the opportunity to do that. And look, let's just face it, we're living longer, but the medicine is really, the technology, the research has really caught up and is helping us live longer.
Oh yeah, I think there's no question about that. I think you raise a great point that simply continuing to work doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to stick to one job or to one profession. I think there are a whole host of opportunities. I think that a key part of that, as we know, and a recent study talked about what are the key correlators for predictors in terms of longevity and how much we connect with others, and even more importantly, what we're able to do for others in terms of serving others is a critical component as a determinant of our longevity. Yes, and number two, we are living longer because have been many advances in terms of how we treat chronic disease now that are very different even from 5 years ago. So if you look at the advent of GLPs and that whole category of drugs now that are not just being used for the treatment of diabetes, but weight loss, I think have dramatically changed how we may be looking at the impact of obesity and diabetes on our overall comorbidities in terms of mortality. And I think we're going to see even more innovation. Of course, comes along with that the importance of stressing the relevance of physical mobility and exercise and nutrition, which I know are front and center right now in terms of eliminating or reducing ultra processed foods, ensuring that everybody is getting, enough physical exercise. And, in the recent article that, you had, mentioned earlier that I did in the Baltimore Sun about Dr. Oz, who I've known well for over 2 decades, I've always felt, and certainly as a physician, that we need to be models of health for others to emulate, right? So
Mhm.
in our leadership, we still have, and this is not just the U.S., but a generation that has a lot of wisdom. But we need to be the models of health in our 80s and otherwise. That we also practice what we preach in terms of fitness and exercise and you know being a role model for others to be able to emulate. Because if I'm a doctor that's overweight and not controlling my own health, I'm not going to be able to convince you very much that you should be doing the same when I'm not really emulating that or modeling that behavior, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they teach you this. I'm not a parent, but I've always been told that when you're a parent, do as you say, make sure you follow through because your children
Yeah.
will follow that. And I think you make a good point. I mean, if our medical leaders are not keeping fit and not doing the right things, how can you emulate that behavior? So I completely agree. In the remaining time we have left, I wanted to, you are a physician and you know a lot more than I about aging and what that means to the body. There's been a lot of research out there in terms of extending lifespans. Uh, what's the latest thinking on, do we have the ability, the propensity as humans, as we have currently evolved to living into the triple digits? Do we have the structural ability to do that if we do the right behaviors that you and others in the medical community are articulating? I'm
Well,
just trying to
you
get an
raise
idea of how much money I'm
yeah,
going to need in
you raise
retirement.
you raise a great point, and I think there's enough science to tell us now that if you do a big determinant of how you do when you reach the 90s and maybe past the century mark is very much determined by what we do up until about our 70s. So, how well we manage those risk factors during that period in terms of all of the things that we know about that are very common: hypertension, high blood pressure, reducing the risk of diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, ensuring that our diets and, of course, our physical activity are all calibrated. And I've always had this belief that every 10 years, we have to sort of make the adjustment in terms of you can't eat in your 30s what you used to eat in your 20s, right?
No,
And about every 10 years. But the problem is, if you keep eating into your 30s and your 40s the way that we did in our teenage years, where, nothing accumulates, well, then that's where the curves don't really adjust because our metabolism is changing. So that's one thing, is how are we recalibrating as our own internal processes are recalibrating so that we're in sync with that. I think that genetics plays a big part of it. And I do find that many a time I will see patients and talk to others that are living into their 90s and their parents did. And so there is, I do believe, some genetic component in terms of aging that is a determinant on top of those risk factors. So there is the nurture and nature component that I think go hand in hand, that we do have an overall responsibility. And then certainly our environment and our epigenetics do play a role in terms of how we age. And I think a big part of it, of course, is not just the physical health, but I think a big part of it is our mental health in terms of ensuring, dementia and Alzheimer's are a big deal in terms of aging and how we remain, our cognitive skills remain even along with the physical. And I think that that's where the human connection and continuing to retain what we're doing cognitively in terms of engaging in activities that stimulate our brain to stay active are very important. And that is bodes well for the argument of why staying engaged in some kind of cognitive activity, job related, can help that overall health. So I think
Yeah.
it's multifaceted.
It's amazing, doctor, and I do have to run, but I'll close out by saying it's amazing how much is actually in our control versus not in our control.
Yeah,
And I think it makes the case for what we were talking about earlier, which is maybe extending the retirement age, although probably voluntarily is probably where, we don't do too
yeah,
well
I
on
think
mandates in
so.
this country, but probably voluntarily. And I think maybe, hopefully, this discussion will help people kind of reposition that line of thinking. Dr. Potarazu, so great to see you. Thanks for joining
Thank
us, and we look
you.
forward to having you back on the program again very
That
soon,
sounds
sir.
good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for watching, and don't forget, we're back again tomorrow morning with another great expert and another great topic. You can tune in right here Monday through Sunday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place, delivered directly to your email box. Check it out at our website.